I want to talk about that because I don't think Simba thought through what he was saying. What does Simba want to be? He wants to be king. He's practicing up his roar. He's practicing looking down on things. Of course, if he'd have really thought what he was requesting through, you do realize, right? There could only be one king. And the current king was Mufasa, the dad of Simba. So if Simba had really thought through what he was singing, for Simba to be king, then Mufasa can't be. And therefore Mufasa would have to die in order for Simba to be king. Funny how he lost his perspective, wasn't it? He was so focused on not wanting to be told where he had to be, when he had to be there. He was so focused on being in control of his own life that he was singing this song, I just can't wait till I'm in charge. I just can't wait till I'm calling the shots. I just can't wait until I am king. Boy, can't we draw a spiritual analogy there, don't we? I mean, don't we sort of do the same thing? In our own personal, private life, don't we want to be king? Nobody telling us when we have to be here. No one telling us when we have to do something. We want control. We want power.
I can remember the day I arrived in prison, I was thinking to myself, this is tough. I'm going to be separated from my family. I've lost my freedom, lost my right to vote. But I thought this is a really tough deal, and I wasn't really frightened of the other inmates. But I knew it was going to be a lonely, depressing experience. But I felt free inside because at least I'd put the past behind me. I'd also come to terms with who I really was. And that God of power that had driven me all those years was now dethroned, and I really wanted to live. I wanted to live my life only for the living God, the one true God.
So let's have some 1970s trivia. Who here recognizes that gentleman? Oh, I heard one whisper. His name is Chuck Colston. Now, if you don't recognize Chuck Colston, it's probably because you're like me and you were like 3 or 4 when this man was making headlines. Or maybe you're younger than me and you just weren't even around during that time. But Chuck Colston is somewhat famous. You know, we've had these football things going on. They call them Deflategate, and they've called them Spygate, and they have these words that end in gate. And you always wonder, why do scandals always end in the word gate? It's because of the most famous gate of all. It's called Watergate. Now, if you're not familiar with that, then you obviously need to go read some history books about U.S. history, because it is the scandal of all scandals, because it is the scandal that brought down the only American presidency in impeachment where they actually successful. Well, actually he resigned before they impeached him. They were going to. But Chuck Colston was in the middle of Watergate. As a matter of fact, Chuck Colston began his life as a lawyer, and then he worked his way into politics, and he worked his way up the ranks of politics, and he finally became the right-hand man of the president, Richard Nixon. And when Watergate broke, Chuck Colston, the man with all the power, the man that they basically said would run over his own grandmother if given the chance, the hatchet man of the White House, found himself embattled in the middle of this. And well, he went to jail. He lost his power because his thirst for power ended in his own destruction. The God of power. Do you have a problem with this in your life? This need, this desire for control? If you would have asked Colston that beforehand, he would have said no. As a matter of fact, I don't have that kind of power. My God of power is what we usually call work ethic. Now, if I was to put that out there, would you say this is a good thing? I mean, there's nothing wrong with work ethic, right? My dad instilled work ethic in me. How did he do so? Dragging me out to bed at 5 o'clock in the morning to shovel snow. Introduced me to Mr. Lawnmower when I was very young. He instilled work ethic to me because there was a responsibility. There is nothing wrong with teaching somebody a good work ethic. As a matter of fact, I am trying to do the same thing with my kids. That is a desire. I want my kids to have a very good work ethic about their life. I like the phrase, an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. You should earn the pay that they're giving you. But the problem is when we switch from just doing good to being kind of like Simba, a desire to be great. It is no longer just this thing that I'm doing, just the fact that I am doing a good job. I desire to be greatness. I want the attaboys. I want the pats on the back. I want the control in my life. And then we go from just doing good things to we now have a God. See, the God of power works just like all the other gods we've been talking about. There's nothing wrong with food. There's nothing wrong with pleasure. There's nothing wrong with entertainment or relaxation until that becomes the God. There's nothing wrong with relationships. There's nothing wrong with God's idea until that becomes a God. There's nothing wrong, believe it or not, there's nothing wrong with money. There's nothing wrong with going out and earning money. There's nothing wrong with it until that becomes the emphasis of your life. There's nothing wrong with any of these things until they become the essence of our life. And I think many of us, especially we live in a capitalistic society that teaches get all you can and can all you get, climb to the top of the ladder, be successful. Well, we worship work ethic. We do. But I want to introduce you to somebody else that just couldn't wait to be king. His name is King Uzziah. I practiced saying that name before I got here because there's several different ways you could say that, but I looked it up phonetically. It's Uzziah. King Uzziah, so if you have your copy of God's Word, go ahead and make your way to 2 Chronicles chapter 26. This is another one of those sermons. We're not bouncing around a lot. You can pull the one right out of the pew rack in front of you, and you can follow along because we're going to be in the same place for the whole time. And we're going to look at this just can't wait to be king, this person that got caught up into the God of power, and we're going to look exactly where it left his life. And we're going to start in verses 1 through 5, the rise to power. Then all the people of Judah took Uzziah, who was 16 years old, and made him king in place of his father Amaziah. He was the one who rebuilt Elath and restored it to Judah. After Amaziah rested with his ancestors, Uzziah was 16 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 52 years. His mother's name was Jochlah. She was from Jerusalem. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father Amaziah had done. He sought God during the days of Zechariah, who instructed him in the fear of God. As long as he sought the Lord, God gave him success. And I like King Uzziah because he is what I guess you would call close to a self-made man, even though he was the prince, he was the son of a king. But he became king at the age of 16. Now, I remember being 16. I really do. And I just want to tell you, your heart would tremble at the thought that they made me king when I was 16 years old. Because I know what I was like at the age of 16, and it wasn't a good thing. I had many issues in my life at the age of 16. I have many issues today. You still don't want me to be king today, but at 16, those issues were the focus of my life. And so, but at 16 years old, here is this young man that comes to power, and I guess as kings go, if you actually read through 1st and 2nd Kings and Chronicles and how long some of these kings lasted, he had a pretty good career. He was king for 52 years. That means that he was 68 years old when he actually stopped being king. That's about right. That's a good retirement age if you're king. You can still live enough to enjoy the fruits of your labor. But during his reign, he was known because he honored God. Uzziah didn't leave God out of the early part of his kingdom. He made sure he did the things that were supposed to be done. And I guess he got the ultimate compliment to his dad because he followed in his father's footsteps. He had watched Dad honor God, and he had watched how Dad had ruled, and he had watched how Dad had done things. And Uzziah, at the beginning of his kingship, began to pattern his life just like dear old Dad. But then it happened. He began to accomplish. Things began to go well for good old King Uzziah, and things were going good, and the kingdom was growing, and profit shares were up, and the treasury was full, and everybody was happy, and everybody was saying, "All hail King Uzziah! He is better than his dad. He's doing so much for us," because This man was successful. Man, let me tell you just how successful King Uzziah was. King Uzziah was successful at war. This is what it says in verses 7 and 8. He went to war against the Philistines. Now, we're familiar with these guys. They've been around for a long time. They were the ones that Samson was fighting. They're the ones that have been a thorn in the flesh of Israel's side ever since the very first days. And it says he went to war against the Philistines and broke down the walls of Gath. You remember that city? That's the one that had the big gate that that David hid out in. That's that city. He broke down the walls of Gath and Jebna and Ashdod. He rebuilt the towns near Ashdod, elsewhere among the Philistines. God helped him against the Philistines and against the Arabs who lived in Gur and Baal, and against the Midianites and the Amorites. He brought tribute to Uzziah, and his fame spread far as the border of Egypt. Wow. Because he had become very powerful. Man, you're talking about something that'll bloat your head up. You go out and you fight a battle and the thorn in the flesh of the Israelites, man, you just seem to flick them away like a fly. That city that everybody had been trying to conquer for so many years, you break its walls down. All of those strongholds that the Philistines are having, you're breaking them all. You're being successful at war. Now, I do want you to see something. In the early days, Uzziah got it right. He didn't leave God out of what he was doing. Okay, he remembered who God was, and God blessed him as he remembered, because his fame began to spread throughout the nation, beyond the nation, all the way back down to the borders of Egypt, which is kind of significant, because guess what? That's where this whole thing started, right? When they left Egypt. So here is Uzziah, the successful at war, and he is successful as a builder. He becomes an accomplished builder. Now I want you to listen to the verse, and we'll come back and talk about what he built. Uzziah built towers in Jerusalem at the corner gate, and at the valley gate, and the angels and the and the angle of the wall, and fortified them. He also built towers in the wilderness and dug many cisterns, because he had much livestock in the foothills and the plains. He had people working in fields and vineyards and hills and fertile lands, for he loved the soil. And so he wasn't just a city man. Now, he built cities. That's what it says. He built cities. He built a wall, and he built towers, and he built cities. It says he built some outposts. When you look at this, he began to build those little places where the military people could hang out and protect the border. So he had some foresight. He didn't just build cities, he built outposts. And then I guess you can really give him some credit, because he built farms. He wasn't just interested in becoming an urban society. He actually built farms. Now you think about this. Isn't this a great king? He's remembering everybody. He's remembering the city folk, and the country folk, and the military folk, and everybody. He's doing everything he can for everywhere. And as he's going, he's just getting more success, and more power, and more fame. And you know what that happens, don't you? Yeah, maybe they had to expand the walls and the doorways in the castle a little bit, because his head's probably getting a little bit bigger, and a little bit bigger. He goes from just being successful at war, then what he's successful because he builds a military force. Listen to verses 11 through 15. Uzziah had a well-trained army, ready to go out by divisions according to their numbers, as mustered by Jehleth, the secretary of Maaseiah, the officer under director of Hananiah, one of the royal officers. The total number of family leaders over the fighting men was 2,600 under their command. And it was an army of 307,500 men trained for war, a powerful force to support the king against his enemies. Uzziah provided shields, spears, helmets, coats of armor, bows, sling stones, an entire army. In Jerusalem, he made devices invented for the use of towers and corner defenses, so that soldiers could shoot arrows and hurl large stones from walls. His fame spread far and wide. He was greatly helped until he became powerful. Do you see it starting? Do you see the seeds? Do you see the seeds of power beginning to creep into Uzziah's life? Because what's missing in those verses that we just saw in the others? There's no mention of God. What has he begun putting his trust in? 307,500 men. He's now saying, I can build an army big enough. I can train that army. I can have generals. And you know what? He was an inventor. He wasn't just a builder. He was an inventor. He began to invent army things for war to protect the nation. Now, is there anything wrong with what he's doing? Probably not. The kingdom's growing. We believe in strong military. But the problem is he's now starting to put his faith in his own power, not God's. Man, do you see the Pharisee and tax collector lesson just weaving its way right back into the sermon? Because here it is, Uzziah is doing the no-no. Power has now become a god. He is not just powerful, he is now trying to develop power in his own life. And you know what happens, right? The higher you climb up the ladder, the more power you gain, the further you fall. And I want to tell you something. Good old King Uzziah at the age of 66, boy, did he take a tumble. Listen to verses 16 through 18. But after Uzziah became powerful, his pride. Oh. Isn't it interesting that when lions get together in the group, what they call them? They're called a pride, right? Because they are the thing. Nobody attacks a group of lions unless you wish to be dinner. It just doesn't happen. It says his pride led to his downfall. Oh, listen to the next sentence. He was unfaithful to the Lord his God. How did that happen? And he entered the temple of the Lord to burn incense on the altar. Uzziah the priest, with 80 other courageous priests of the Lord, followed him in. They confronted Uzziah and said, "It is not right for you, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord." This is for the priest, the descendants of Aaron, who have been consecrated to burn incense. Leave the sanctuary, for you have been unfaithful, and you will not be honored by the Lord. Oh my gosh, do you see what's happening? The more power he had, the less he needed God. Wrap your brain around that for a second. The more power Uzziah got, the less he had a need to be faithful to God. The more soldiers he had under his command, the more he did not have to fear his enemies anymore. The more power he got, the less he needed God. And then it said he became prideful. Isn't that what power does? As I gain more power and I have more success and everybody's lifting me up and putting me up on this pedestal and say, "Oh, look at this, he's great, he's great, he's great." And suddenly I begin to believe my own press. And I begin to think, I am great. I am good at what I do. As a matter of fact, maybe I'm the best at what I do. And I've conquered all of this, so maybe there's another area of my life I need to conquer. And so it says he was unfaithful to the Lord his God. Now, I want you to see, he didn't abandon God. This is important. This says he was unfaithful to the Lord his God. He did not abandon God. He still saw God as an important part of his kingdom, but he knew the rules, right? I mean, this is Judaism. You know how this works, right? You know that only certain people were allowed in the holy place, and there was really only one person allowed in the Holy of Holies. Uzziah knew this. But after all, he had conquered all of his enemies. Why not conquer God too? Why not go where I'm not supposed to be? And the truth became, the reason Uzziah began to fall is because his way became better than God's way. His way became better than God's way. How he wanted to do things became better than what God had said. He began to say, "God, that's a wonderful plan that these priests do all this sacrifice, but I'm the king and I deserve to be in your presence too. And what I think is better than what you think." Have you ever been there with God? And God has got something that he has put out there and said, this is what I desire you to do. And you're like, you know what? I'm glad you have your plan, God, but I got mine too. And right now, I just think mine's a little better than yours. I don't need to do things your way. I don't want anybody telling me, see here, be that. It's the Simba attitude. It's the attitude that I want to be king, even if it means I have to take you off of the throne, God. See, that's the essence of what power does. And it's hurtful. When power becomes your God, God has to do something about it. And boy, did he do something about it. You see, good old King Uzziah went from arrogance to humility. This is what happened in verses 19 through 20. Uzziah, who had a censer in his hand, ready to burn incense, became angry while he was raging at the priests in their presence before the incense in the altar in the Lord's temple. Leprosy broke out on his forehead. When Uzziah, the chief priest, and all the other priests looked at him, they saw he had leprosy on his forehead. So they hurried him out. Indeed, he himself was eager to leave because the Lord had afflicted him. There's a very valuable lesson in what God did here. You see, in spite of the warnings, he was determined to do things his way. Did you catch what was going on there? See, in spite of the warnings that he was given, he was determined, I'm going to do this my way. So here he is, he's got the censer in his hand, and the priest is saying, put it down, you don't want to do this. And he's yelling at them. He's becoming angry at them. He's becoming furious because who are you, lowly priest? I am King Uzziah. Haven't you read the comic books lately? I am the hero of Israel. Who do you have tell me what to do? See, when he was confronted, he became angry. He became argumentative. He came to the point that he was not willing to listen to anybody. Now, I want to ask you, have you ever been that way? You've got a plan. You've got something you want to do. And maybe what you want to do is a great thing. But you know what? People are standing up saying, it's not the right way to do this. It's not where you want to go. It's not where you want to be. But you were so determined that then you began to attack the very people that are trying to help you. You ever been there? Do you realize that's the God of power? That's your pride talking, that I can do things my way. Well, God's got an answer for that. See, he became humbled. Now, that's an important word. He became humbled. He did not humble himself. He became humbled because God said, let me tell you how this is going to work. I'm going to strike you down. I'm not going to kill you. He probably would have wished he would have. I'm going to afflict your body with leprosy. And that leprosy is going to leave a legacy for good old King Uzziah. This is what verse 21 says. King Uzziah had leprosy until the day he died. He lived in a separate house. He lived in a separate house, leprous, and banned from the temple of the Lord. Jotham, his son, had charge of the palace and governed the people of the land. Man, he lost the praise of the people, didn't he? I mean, no more was he Uzziah the great, he was Uzziah the leper. He lost all of that praise of the people. Did you really catch it? He lost his ability to worship. Let that, again, percolate. See, now he had leprosy, and leprosy was such a contagious disease, you were not allowed to go back to the temple while you were leprous. Therefore, not only could he now not do the thing that he thought he was supposed to be doing, now he could not even go back into the very presence of God through worship. That's kind of humbling, isn't it? He lost his kingdom, didn't he? Oh, wow, yeah. It says his son now got to live in the palace. His son now got to take the seat. His son now got to be king. not Uzziah. As a matter of fact, it says Uzziah got a little house outside the home. He got his retirement home, I guess it was. Little house outside the city where nobody ever came to visit him because nobody else wanted leprosy. It cost him a lot, didn't it? This worshiping the God of power, he will forever be remembered as the king with leprosy, not Uzziah the Great. That's a sad story, isn't it? I don't think that would make a very good Disney movie because it doesn't have a happily ever after in it. That's a very sad story, but here's the question. Are you worshiping power? Do you have in your life this need to be in control? And I realize as you look at the thing, you think, wow, I'm almost out of blanks. Cool. Well, that's because I want your attention now. Because I want to ask you something. Who are you? How do you introduce yourself? Is it by some job title? Is it by a family name? Is it by some accomplishment? Maybe you introduce yourself by the church you go to. When you're trying to tell people who you are, then you walk up and you hand out the hand and you say, I am so-and-so, and then they give you this look and you start reading off your resume. Well, I work for LexisNexis, or I go to Stanton Church of Christ, or I'm a nurse, or I'm a doctor, or I'm a this. How do you introduce yourself? Because how you introduce yourself maybe might tell you something about what's really important to you. Do you ever introduce yourself as just, I'm a Christian? No, we wouldn't do that. That would make people think we're some kind of Jesus freaks. That's not the way you do things. That would make me seem pompous and pious, and that's not what I'm asking you. I'm just asking you, what do you value? What is it that gives you control in your life? Maybe that's the thing you're beginning to worship. Are you trying to impress God? Is your faith defined by just simple statistics? That's a sobering one. I have somewhere in a box somewhere, I have a certificate that has a date on it that'll tell you the day that I was baptized. I can't tell you the last time I looked at that thing. It's in a box somewhere. I think it's in one of the boxes we stuck underneath the house with all the other mementos that I have from my childhood. Because you know what? That certificate doesn't impress God. You know, I have lots of little Sunday school awards when I grew up about perfect attendance and about attending VBS and all of this kind of stuff. And we have those. And I guess what I should do is I should take those out and hang them up on my wall because that impresses God, right? No, it doesn't. It doesn't impress God. You see, we look to those things sometimes to give us significance to God, but do you realize we're worshiping power when that is the essence of our faith? Not the relationship. So here's the big question. Are you following God's plan? Or are you planning on God following yours? Yeah, that was like a punch to the stomach, wasn't it? How are you living your life? Are you looking at the plan God has in front of you and saying, yes, God, I'll do that? Or are you making a plan and then just saying, God, this is what we're doing. Let's go this way. Because you realize the difference, right? The God of power is going to ultimately leave you powerless. You ultimately follow your own plan and do things your own way. God will let you go there. You do realize God had the power to stop Uzziah at any point. He could have, when Uzziah started to head for that temple, God could have caused a big old angel to pop up in front of him and say, Uzziah, you're not going in here. No. God let him go all the way in. God let him follow his plan to the point at which it would have violated what God had said. And then God said, now I'm going to put a stop to it. I gave you every chance you could out there. I gave you people telling you to stop. I gave you the law. I gave you the rules. I gave you what you're supposed to do. I told you. And at the point you decided not to listen to me and you picked up the censer, now I got a problem. And so God said, now I'll put a stop to it. And he left him with nothing except for his own life. He left him sitting in the house in the quietness, pondering, why did I have to get so arrogant in what I was doing? Chuck Colston could feel this. Because Chuck Colston ended up having to spend years in prison for his role in Watergate. And it was in that time that he found out who Christ was, and he rededicated his life. And when he became a Christian, when he came out, he spent the last part of his life trying to warn people against chasing this God of power, because he understands where it will lead you. Now, these are the extremes. I don't think any of us are currently the right-hand people of the president, so I'd like to talk to you. I have a few suggestions for you, but that's okay. So I don't know that you have that kind of power, and I don't know anybody here that's king, but if you are a king, let me know. I have a few suggestions for you too. But here's the deal. You understand that is the extreme, but in your own life, you are sometimes the king of your own life if you want to be. You can take control. You can lay out the plan. You can say, God, this is how it's going to be. Take me as it is. Take it or leave it. Let me tell you what God's answer is to that. Leave it. Because God has a plan that he expects us to follow if we're going to make him king. And please note the lesson from Simba. There can't be two kings. If you decide to make yourself king, then you have to kill God from your life. There can't be two kings. It's a throne, not a love seat. Only one king allowed. So I want to ask you today, who is king in your life? Who's got the power in your life? Is it you or is it God? We're going to do a time of decision, and I want you to really ponder that thought, because maybe today he's not king because you've never given him your life. You've never accepted him as your personal Lord and Savior. You've never followed him in baptism. Maybe those are the things that are in your way. You know what? God says, I want to be king. But that also means I'm in charge. I'm Lord. And maybe today is the day you need to take that next step to putting God on the throne of your heart. Maybe you're having the issues because you're here today and you've done that part, but you know what? You're struggling with other things in your life. Other things in your life. Your plan is on the throne, with how you want things to go. Regardless of what God says, you pushed him to the side, and now you're saying, this is how I want it to work. God, you're just going to have to deal with it. Maybe this is your day to start taking some of those things that are king of your life and taking them off the throne so that you can have an empty seat for God. I don't know what it is you have to deal with. I know I've got my own set of issues that I have to constantly remind myself to take those things off the throne and allow that seat to be empty so God will sit down. Because God won't sit until it's empty. You do realize that, right? God will not force his way to rule over your life. You have to be willing to empty the throne so that he may take the seat.